first question is about how long have you been here?
Well, my folks were married here in they were married in 1899 in Kalamazoo, and then they came on to Detroit, and we became members. My father didn't graduate, but went for 3 years to the Hebrew Union College. And that was very important to all of us.
So how did your parents get to Kalamazoo?
My father went to the Hebrew Union College, and in his 3rd year he went to his brother's place, which was in Buchanan, Michigan, which is 100 miles aside of Chicago. And my mother had got a job. If she had just graduated from high school, and she got a job at at my son I get mixed up in words here.
It's okay.
My father's brother's store. That's the job she had. And he came to the store and he met her. And he fell madly in love with her. She wasn't Jewish. So they sent her to Kalamazoo to her grandparents to get her away from my father, and my father followed her there. And he asked her to meet him at the courthouse, which she did. He said, "Jean, if you don't marry me, I'm going to join the Rough Riders." She said, "You look like hell on a horse, Max, let's get married." And that was the end of that. And that's when they came on to Detroit.
Tell me about her parents. What happened after they went ahead and got married, after they wanted them to not get married? What happened?
They went back to the house, and my grandparents, after they were married, said, well, my grandfather said, well, she's married, so all right, let's take it from there, and that was the end of it. But then, of course, he couldn't go on to the Hebrew Union College because she wasn't Jewish at that point.
Why couldn't he go on?
In those days, they didn't do things like this. That was not according to Hoyle, should I say?
So you make this sound, this is a lovely family story.
Well, yes, it was. But he left the Hebrew Union College in his 3rd year, at the end of his 3rd year. And my father's married they traveled on the road. He became a traveling salesman for a number of years. So when their first child was born, they had 2 children. And the first child was born shortly after they were married, about a year afterwards. And that was when he was in his 3rd year, he died. And they brought the body here to Detroit. And my father joined the temple. And he's buried at Woodmere, or at the cemetery on I can't think of the name of it. It's a cemetery that he was buried in, and that's the story.
So your parents had a child?
They had 2 children.
2 children.
That's right.
Okay.
But this was in around they were married in 1899, so that meant that it was I wasn't born until 1911. But they had the 2 children, and one of them died. And my brother, of course, was the one that I knew, and he was my love life during my growing up period.
Tell Tell me about your brother.
Well, he was 10 years older than myself, and that meant that I was the baby, of course, and he adored me. That's all.
Okay. So your family moved here to Detroit,
Yes.
and you grew up at Bethel.
Yes.
Okay. So your little girl, and what do you remember?
Well, first of all, I remember that when we went from kindergarten, I went to for the first few years, I went to the Elliott Street Temple that was on Woodward and Elliott, which is now the old Wayne University now.
So that might have been 1916, 1917.
That's right,
You
yes.
have a memory of Temple at that time.
Yes, it was very cold. I didn't like it at all. I used to go, of course, my folks went with me because I was, well, I guess they kind of pampered me a little bit. And I went to, it was quite a deal to go to. We had to take 2 streetcars to go because we lived on West Grand Boulevard at that time. And it was quite a trip going from West Grand Boulevard over to Woodward and Elliott Street. See, it was quite a trip there. And then so that's very, very, very little that I remember of my early years in the Sunday school.
Okay.
But although I think I had probably the same teachers I had when we went to Woodward and Gladstone.
But you remember the Woodward and Elliott
Yes.
building
Oh,
before
yes.
Woodward and Gladstone.
Oh, yes.
That's so
Yes.
nice.
It's very interesting. It was quite a deal. But the thing I remember most is the fact that it was so cold. We always, we'd take the streetcar and we'd have to wait because streetcars were never on time either in those days.
Now you're saying here that you remember about your confirmation and your graduation. What can you tell us about that?
Well, not too much. I mean, I went to when I graduated from. Well, my brother went when my brother went to when he graduated or was confirmed in Temple. Dr. Franklin used to visit us very often because, of course, of my father attending they were classmates at the Hebrew Union College, and as a result of it, it was quite a deal. And then after that, then I was confirmed. But my class was a very large class. It was I think it was the first class with so many people that they had to take the pictures outside of the Woodward and Gladstone building because they couldn't take pictures of the whole class at one time in the sanctuary. So they took it outside on Woodward.
How old would you have been then?
Well, I was 13, see. And then I graduated in 1930.
Did Temple have high school social activities?
Oh, yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, they had quite a few things, but I was majoring in music at the time, so that I didn't participate in many of the activities when I was young, because I was concentrating on music and things like that. So it was quite a deal.
Okay. Now you're telling me about your father went to services.
Oh, yes. It's quite a deal. My father was very strict when it came to coming to Temple. First of all, he always carried an umbrella and his hat. And he'd come into his seat and he'd put hat under the seat and the umbrella in front of him. And I would be sitting there. Sometimes I would come to services, or sometimes I would go on to Sunday school. But when they finally had services on Sunday, I would go in and sit next to them very often. And it was quite a deal, I mean, to sit there and listen to him, to the rabbi talk and so on. And
Did your mother attend services?
oh yes, it was very important. Mother and Dad made it a big deal to come to Sunday school and go to Sunday school services.
Do you know if your mother converted to Judaism?
Oh yes, oh yes. She converted in 1903 with Dr. Franklin was her conversion.
Now, you're talking about Eleanor Roosevelt a little bit here. Tell us about that.
Well,
We're fast forwarding now.
yeah, that's going forward, yes. We met in the study outside, just outside the Bema here. And I expected a tall woman because she was, although she was older, I mean, she was about my age that I am now. But she was a wonderful woman, really. I fell in love with her. From the minute I came into the room, she was such a delight, such a delightful woman. Her personality was lovely. And my son was only 11 years old at the time, and he had won a prize from the congregation. And she was... they had made arrangements to have this interview with her. But I expected a tall woman, first of all. But when I got in the room with her, she was small. She wasn't much taller than I am, really. And she seemed, or at least she seemed to be, she was very much a grandmother, a wonderful woman, really. And I fell in love with her.
Tell us about you meeting Aid.
It's a long time ago.
Take me back.
Yes. We were...
You graduated. You did confirmation. You graduated.
That's
What
right.
happened next?
That's right. Well, then I went to Wayne University, and then I met my husband. But he was the trainer of the Detroit Lions at the time. And my father, we went up north to Gassel Lodge, which was a resort that everybody went to in those days. And it was quite a deal. I thought that, he thought I was going with another boy. And he had written to me and asked me if I would come to the Army-Navy game that was going on. And my husband didn't like the idea at all. So he made arrangements, and he gave me what he called his ball and chain. It was a chain with the football on it. And that was the beginning. And Dr. Franklin was coming in. He was in Florida, and I said, we had a new rabbi that had come in, and I said, I wouldn't have this Rabbi Glazer, because I would have Dr. Franklin, because Dr. Franklin was a friend of the family's. So he came in, and he said, he flew in from Florida to perform the wedding. only Dr. Glaser should officiate along with him. In fact, I think I started that business with 2 rabbis. And we were married. And we went into he asked us to go after the service. We went into the same room that Eleanor Roosevelt was in. And we went in there, and we stayed, until he called for us. We stayed there for about 45 minutes. We just sat there and looked over all the things that we had received. And then we went downstairs because there were 500 people at our wedding. My father was very active in the Masons at the time. He was, in fact, he was a chaplain until he died. And he was, it was quite a deal then. And then my husband knew all the football players, so that we had so many people in the temple. It was wonderful. It was a wonderful marriage.
What year did you get married?
1942. And our son was born in 1943, our oldest son.
For the next year. So this was during the war.
Yes.
What was the war like here?
It was horrible. There was, well, first of all, my husband was stationed at Grosse Ile for the first, 1942 till 43. Actually, what happened was, well, anyway, they went, kind of lost my trend here.
You're talking about the war?
Yeah. I can remember much of the war because there was a great deal on. There was something at Himmelhoek's. Himmelhoek's had closed. Russix, I think, was next to Himmelhoek's, and they were closed. And they had big signs on the doors or on their windows. Join the Navy, join the Army, things like this. When reality, I found out later that there were secret things going on within the building in Russix for the atomic bomb.
Come to find that out?
Well, later on they talked about it. You know, as time went on, people discussed this sort of thing. I mean, really, I don't know whether how true it was or not, but actually that's what they talked about, that there was something going on. And
was Temple involved in anything during the war in terms of activities related to the war effort, supporting?
Oh, I think so. I think they were. I think everybody was. Everybody was very much involved in this because, you see, now my son was born in 43, but I said goodbye to my husband in 1940. In 43, April of 1943, I said goodbye to my husband, and he went overseas, and he was gone for 5 years. He was stationed over there. He was stationed in Australia for 5 years. And as a result of it, in fact, even the mailman used to come to the door and he would say, "Miss Miriam, don't come downstairs." We lived upstairs at the time. He says, "Please, I'll ring the doorbell when I come if there's mail for you." That's how nice people were.
So you had 2 sons? Tell us about.
I had 2 sons.
Okay, tell us a little bit about the family life, what that was like, and the sons growing up.
Well, my youngest son, my oldest son, of course, we lived at home. And in fact, my father took my oldest son as his first child. There was a relationship there. And from then he went on into the let's see.
You were talking about your son, and you were living at home with your parents.
Yes.
During the war.
Yes.
Okay. And then Abe was gone for 5 years.
Yes.
Okay.
When he came home, we got a place on Collingwood. We lived on Calvert upstairs, and we got a place on Collingwood. My father had an uncle. My father's brother was a builder, and so he had built some houses, and one of them, we got one of them, a 2-flat that we moved into, and that's where we lived for the first, after that time, until we moved out into the northwest area.
And how far was that from Temple at the time?
Well, we lived on, you see, when we lived on Calvert and Collingwood, we were very close to Temple. We were, in fact, when I went to Sunday school, and if you want to make something like that, I can remember riding my bicycle with my girlfriend to Temple. It was very close, you see. Calvert and Woodward. Calvert is close to the Temple at that time, and it was quite a deal.
So that was at home with your parents.
That's when we lived with my parents, and then when I moved on Collingwood, that's when my second boy was born.
Okay.
And we lived there for, I think it was about 2 years. And then we moved to Normandy, which is in the northwest area. Mm-hmm.
So what kind of things were you doing at Temple when your children were small? Were you involved here? You're so involved now.
No, I wasn't. I wasn't very involved. I was, my major was music, and I spent all my time with my music. I studied with Guy Mayer and with Bennett and Netzorg, and
What was your instrument?
piano.
Your piano.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So it was quite a deal.
You raised a family.
Oh yes.
You played the piano.
And I played the piano,
Okay.
and then as I got older, of course, naturally, when the children came, my life turned around and was involved with the children. And then as they got older, of course, naturally, everything evolved around our children and our life together. And
Now, was Abe with the Lions his whole career?
yes, he was, when he joined the Navy, he joined the Navy in the morning, and he proposed to me at Webster Hall at night. I felt very badly when Webster Hall was torn down. It was such a deal. And it's quite a deal, I mean, really, when you stop to think of it. I've covered a lot of territory here.
Yes, you have. Yes, you have. So your children grew up here. I guess one question I had for you is, how's it different, your Sunday school and the education you think you got versus the one your sons got?
I think that it was pretty much the same. I think that our Sunday school hasn't changed much over the years. There's only so much you can teach a child as far as history is concerned, and I think it's been very much the same.
Okay. Okay. Now, one of the things that Abe did was he built these little houses, these little
Yes. Oh, that story. You want to hear that story?
Yes, I think we all want to hear that story.
It's quite a deal. He had been home with a cold, and he wasn't getting better. And I said, "You're going to stay home today." He said, "No, I'm not going to stay home today." I said, "No." I said, "You're going to stay home." He said, "What'll I do if I sit home all day?" I said, "Well, I happened to walk past our hallway there, and on a desk was a book, and I picked it up, and it was the Bethel story. And I opened it up, and I said, "Now, here, make this little house." I said, "This is a good start for you." And that is how he started to make the buildings. He had made for the children, for their in the basement. He had made a train set for them, and he had made little houses for them. So this was something else, but this was a different story. This was the story of Bethel, and I said, "Do the first house, and you'll like it so much. I think maybe you'll go on." And that's what happened.
How many did he ultimately make? Oh, that's a dumb question.
Yeah, it is. But well, I couldn't tell you exactly, but it must be around. I know that we have about 75. We have 50 in the building here. See. So I think there were 75. There's other places that are. In fact, the other day somebody called and asked if I would consider selling one of the buildings. It was a miniature synagogue in California that called and asked.
Okay. One of the things you mentioned here is your father died in 1960.
Yes.
You want to tell us about that?
Well, the thing that was bad about it was the fact that my father died in 1960. He was 91 years old. But the same week of his death, my son left for Israel. And this was quite a deal. See, to say goodbye to one and goodbye to the other at the same time was quite a deal.
Your son went to Israel.
Yes.
Did he come back?
Oh, yes. That's right. That's, in fact, both of my boys are rabbis. And Larry went over to Israel, and then I got kind of used to the idea. Yeah.
Okay. What is it that you think that caused your sons to both become rabbis?
Well, I've asked that question myself many times, and I sometimes I wonder why. But at the same time, I unconsciously brought them up in such a way that we were very proud of going to the Hebrew Union College when they were young. We would go there. My father would have a lot of classmates that he would see down there, and we were very proud of the fact. And as a result, I think this is what started it.
Did your father live to see his
Yeah.
grandsons?
No, my father died, of course, when Larry was just going into the Hebrew Union. He knew he was going into the Hebrew Union, and he said, you'll get a lot of free dinners if you go to the... So that was quite a deal. But it wasn't good. It was not. It was nice, though.
Tell us a little bit about the archive here.
Well, in 19, I can't remember the date now, but Irving Katz had a marvelous collection. He inherited it from Dr. Franklin. And I was working with him on some of these things. And of course I was very interested in things like that, there were many things in the archives that I was very interested in. And it was not quite a deal. I mean, really, I don't think so much of it. I mean, he had the collection, and I just kind of took it over and just divided it up into sections, and now that's where it is. When later on you'll go upstairs and you'll see.
Been up there. Okay, we've covered the things we were going to talk about here. I think, did you have a question that I hadn't asked?
I just the whole musical thing and the actions in that and how that played into your life in the temple, but also the reason I'm interested is because you're the same age as my father, and he met my mother in an orchestra in Detroit, and they went to Central Woodward Christian Church, so they're that whole area. So
Yes.
I'm familiar with that, and I'm just wondering about your activity in the whole musical scene and concerts and the marvelous pianists that are be coming into town, Rubinstein and
Oh yes, all of them, all of them.
Yeah, so I'm kind of interested in that aspect of it.
Well, you want me to talk about my music or what?
Sure.
Yeah. Are you still playing?
Oh no, I can't see the notes anymore. I kind of I've given it up, but it was quite a deal working with Mendelssohn Netzorg. I started with Mrs. Rose Rubinstein, who was a pianist here in Detroit, and she sent me over to Netzorg. I'd go once a week. I'd go once a month to him, and he would listen. And then after that, I would go on. Then I ended up with Mendelssohn Netzorg. And of course, he was, at that time, he was the pianist for the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. And then after I graduated from Mendelssohn Netzorg, I went to Guy Mayer, who was that was the first two-piano team in the United States. Guy Mayer and